Hi there, everyone. Welcome back. Simon and Max here again. Good to see you. Thanks for joining us. We're just setting up the technical stuff. Kent's checking out that it's all looking and sounding great. Thank you, Kent.
Awesome.
Excellent. It's almost like we're in a routine here, isn't it? This is great. So we're going to be covering, this is the last session in July that we'll be covering on Magic Bullet looks and more about the color treatments and so on. But it's not our last session with you, because the keen-eyed of you would have noticed that we added another couple of months to these demystified sessions. And by the way, if you don't know where this link is, it's on the redgiant.com site. Just click on blog, so redgiant.com and go to blog, and I'll put this in the notes as well. And hi to Mads from London. Hi there, Mads. Here we go. So in July, these are the 4 sessions that we've been doing recently, and this is what's coming up in August and September. We've got 5 sessions in August, because there's 5 Mondays in August, where we've got the amazing Nick and Chad, who are going to be looking at all things compositing. So all those things that kind of require looking at or deserve investigating. Things like how you blend channels together, colors, render passes, how you deal with edges, choking and light wrap, keying and tracking and adding shadows and using tracking to remove elements from the background, all those sorts of things. So we'll be looking at those all through August. And then in September, you'll be delighted to hear that Ellie and Matt are back, and they're joined by the wonderful Jonas, and we'll be diving into lots more Cinema 4D workflows as well.
Awesome.
So spoiler alert, we're planning more of these for the rest of the year as well, but this is for August and September. So please feel free to click on those links and join us. We'd be delighted to see you. Hi to Rob from Holland. We've got a whole mixture so across the globe today. I'm on the Pacific coast at the moment. It's going to be 100 degrees today, you'll be glad to know. Great. So also just a quick little message, we're recording the session, and as usual we put all the recordings on our YouTube channel just specifically for the volume program training. So these are the last 3 weeks that we've run with the color correction and grading, but if you haven't seen this before, please feel free to view any of the 45 hours worth of content that we've got of all the webinars that we've been running this year, all the ones in this series, so the demystifying ones, plus the ones that people like Lionel did with his amazing redshift compositing, and also motion tracking that Linus did, and all the ones that Ellie and Matt did on Cinema 4D, as well as previous ones that Nick and Chad did on different compositing things. So anyway, loads of content there. And this week, we will be running the Magic Bullet Looks version. So I didn't introduce myself. Hi, I'm Simon Walker, Director of Training from Maxon, and this is the wonderful Max. He's one of our expert trainers.
Hi,
so Max Raharjo.
Max.
Hey, Max. So Max, what are we looking at this week?
Well, today we'll be looking into designing looks or designing grade in Magic Bullet Looks. We have discussed about multiple topics in color corrections and color grading before. So we have looked into the basic of color corrections and the basics of color grading. What are the difference between color corrections and color grading? And also we've also take a look into how to remove digital noise. And also we kind of delve a little bit into creating cinematic look in a fast way using many different tools in Magic Bullet Suite, such as Mojo for quick color grading and Cosmo for color work, skin work. And then today we'll focus into Magic Bullet Looks to create a grade.
Fantastic, excellent, thank you. In fact, I should make you the presenter, shouldn't I? I should swap my screen for you.
Yeah.
Here we are. And we've created, or rather Max has created, a nice little memory jogger with a series of these bullet points.
Yeah.
And we'll make those available to you.
Sure.
So you can have a look at those too.
So like like I already mentioned before, we have discussed a little bit about the basic of primary color corrections and then the secondary color corrections. We come to know that primary color corrections is that color corrections that affects all the footage and without targeting specific region of your image, while the secondary corrections is that targeted corrections. And we also learn how to remove noise very easy with denoiser. It only have 5 sliders. So just use those 5 sliders and you got noise removed instantly. And also last week we took a look into creating a cinematic look. By creating cinematic look, I mean how to mimic those look that we see in the motion picture film. And we did that with Magic Bullet Mojo and Magic Bullet Cosmo. And today we'll be jumping into Magic Bullet looks. So before we started today, let's understand what color grading is. And grading is actually a deliberate use of color shift, which make a picture more pleasing to the eye and convey different emotions. So we sometimes do that by using different hues, different warm and cool hues at the right place. So what is a grade? Well, in my opinion, grade is just a multiple of adjustments that together it creates the overall look or mood of your image. So
it's interesting, isn't it? A lot of people talk about color correction and grading, and kind of those two terms become interchangeable. And
yes,
so it's become and as far as the editors I've been talking to, color correction tends to be the well, correcting the image, and the camera
yeah,
operators that I know also don't appreciate that their images need correction. But I would suppose balancing the shots so that
balancing.
you've got them at a uniform level, like we were
Exactly.
showing with the guided color correction, so that then if you put one of these treatments and the color treatments, as Max is suggesting, over the top, then they will all mix with those quite nicely. And we see this all the time. A lot of the Formula One team, for example, have to use disparate sources from many decades apart. And one of the jobs, of course, is to kind of blend the contrast so that when you put a grade over the top, it all kind of matches. So in these terms, when we say grade, we mean the stylistic treatment, and when we say
Exactly.
color correct, we mean the balancing.
Technical. So how do we do that in Magic Bullet Suite? Well, let's take a look into Magic Bullet Suite. But first, let me cancel my PowerPoint first. Let me close it. Right. So before we move on, I would like to point you out that Magic Bullet Looks has multiple hosts. Today we'll be looking Magic Bullet Looks in Premiere Pro, but Magic Bullet Looks also can be run in After Effects, Final Cut Pro, and Avid Media Composer, and also DaVinci Resolve or Hit Film Pro. In DaVinci Resolve, to run Magic Bullet Looks, you can simply search Magic Bullet Looks in the Open Effects. So for example, you have your primary corrections here, adjusting your contrast. And in the second node, to create a second node, I'm pressing Alt-S to create a second node. And if I want to apply Magic Bullet Looks in my second node, I simply just type in Looks, and you can drag and drop Looks, Magic Bullet Looks in your node. And by pressing Edit Look, we are now in the familiar territory inside Magic Bullet Looks. So I will walk you through the interface in Premiere Pro. But before that, is there anything you would like to add, Simon?
It's interesting. The question that often comes up is, hang on, I've got Resolve. Why do I need Magic Bullet Looks? And I know a lot of colorists who work in Resolve who also use Looks. And what we'll see, what Max will show us, is apart from the fact that the interface means that you can work in the same way in multiple different hosts, you can also save these presets. For example, it's a common thing to have in any broadcaster dozens of edit workstations, but only a handful of grading setups or grading suites. And so many editors are doing a first pass of what they'd like the images to look like. And in some cases, the Resolve artist will then craft a look using the tools in Resolve, but in many cases, they're using that actual looks preset as the basis. Maybe they'll do some skin tone treatments or some other adjustments, and that will be part of it. Because Look still processes at 32-bit, and it still goes up to 8K, and so you can still get a wider dynamic range within looks, actually. So it's an interesting question that we often get. Oh, by the way, a question from Greg for you, Max. What type of footage are you using? Are you using log by any chance, or is this Rec 709?
This is a Rec 709.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a good point, Greg. I'll remember to show you the log workflow inside Looks as well.
Yeah.
I'll make a note to do that.
Sure. So.
Okay, over to you, Max.
All right, thank you. So in Premiere Pro, to run Magic Bullet Looks, you can simply apply Magic Bullet Looks to your footage. First, I will search all the tools I have in Magic Bullet Suite, and by typing in Bullet, I got all the 7 tools in the Magic Bullet Suite. So I will select the Magic Bullet Looks and drop it into my footage. And now in my effect control panels, I have the Edit Look. And once I click Edit Look, we will be entering Magic Bullet Looks interface. And this looks exactly the same. Either you're running it from DaVinci Resolve, or you're running it in Final Cut Pro or After Effects. And that's actually a very nice thing, because once you get used to the interface, everything is just downhill from there. It's a breeze. So in Magic Bullet Look, right on the middle of your viewer, you have the image viewer. This is showing your hero image, the image that you're selecting to represent your scene at most. So ideally, when you are selecting the hero image, it's nice that you are choosing the frame where you got the overall how do you call it, the characteristic of your scene. So it represents the highlight, midtones, and shadow. So right at the bottom, we below the viewer, we have the effect chain, and it is categorized into 5 different categories: subject, matte, lens, camera, and pose. So it's actually representing the workflow of a shot. So the effects that categorize as the subjects are those actually the effects that you can apply while you're shooting in set. So like think about lighting and so on. And then the effect that categorized in matte is actually those effects that you can just put in the matte box in front of your lens. Think of like the drop-in filters or something like that. And then the lens itself are those effects that you can achieve by using the lens of the camera. And then the camera, think of like shutter speed, dragging the shutter speed or getting a shutter streak or something like that. And then the effects in a post-production, category are those effects that you normally do in a post-productions. Just think that the effects that needs the use of computer in this case. And we have 4 different drawers here in Magic Bullet Looks. The first one is Looks. And this drawer, Looks, it contains all the presets available in Magic Bullet Looks. And to open and close that, you can simply either hover over it or you click it. And if you click it, you're actually pinning the drawer. And another drawer is the scopes. This Magic Bullet Looks have many different scopes here: the RGB parade, the slice graph, the hue and the saturations, hue, lightness, and memory color. What's nice is actually, if you stretch it, it's actually scaling itself. And also what's nice, that you can reorder the order of the graph that you're seeing. And The next one is tools. Like the effect chains, it was categorized into 5 different categories: subject, matte, lens, camera, and pose. And to use one of these tools, you can simply drag and drop the tools into the effect chain, or you can simply drag and drop it to the screen. And once you hover over the screen, you have a diagram. And this is showing us that this particular tool can be used in the post area or in the subject area. But that doesn't mean that these tools can only be used there. To use pop tools in, for example, in the category that you cannot use, for example, matte, simply press Control and drag it to matte. And by doing so, you can override the effect chain and put the tool which is not supposed to be there to be in that particular category. So, for example, if I'm dropping in a diffusion tool, you can really see the control in the control drawers over here. And the shortcut for all this drawer are L for the looks or the presets, and S for the scopes, C for the controls, and T for tools.
And that controls one is nice because if you're on a small screen and you want to see it zoom into the image, you can of course scroll the image using the zoom slider or a double finger scroll thing on the trackpad or central mouse button. But that's quite a nice way of being able to make this full screen, to be able to just preview something quickly without scrolling forwards and back.
Exactly. And if you have external monitor, you can use Magic Bullet Looks in external monitor by clicking this gear button over here and selecting Use External Monitor, right?
That, in fact, that's a good point, actually. If you just mouse over that again, please, Max. That external monitor setup works in many situations, but we did notice that if you're on Avid and you're running one of the old, can't remember the name for it. It's been so long, but there's some of the older drivers don't support it, especially if you're on Windows 7. So if you do have a problem with not being able to see the Magic Bullet Looks interface on your external reference monitor, let us know, because it might be just a setting or it might be something we can help you with.
Yeah. And right on the top of the image viewer, we have a triangle here. If you click that, you will open a reference library. So actually, you can load image for later on to be used as a comparison to the footage you're using. And to do that, you can simply click the plus button over here, locate your image, and then select Open, right? And once you have that, you can just simply click the image, and now you have comparison screen. And you can go 100 full like that, or all the way to the left, or 50-50. And to deactivate that view mode, simply just click again the reference library image. You can also take a snapshot of your footage by clicking the camera icon over here.
This is very useful. What we found when we visit customers is that lots of people are used to using Magic Bullet Looks because it's been a favorite for many years. But some of the things that we introduced recently aren't necessarily entirely obvious. Like, for example, the little chevron right at the top of the screen for the reference library. So it's easy to miss that. So an R will open this and close this. But this is the approach to what we're doing today. We're trying to give you a bunch of tips at different levels just to remind you what the interface is. And so this is why Max is doing such a great job at showing you or reminding you what the interface is. And also some little things that you might not necessarily know are there.
Exactly. And what's nice as well, we have a skin overlay. This overlay will show the skin tone in your image. So if you have this grid, it means that the skin is right just about correct. It's located in that eye bar area in the hue saturations scope over here. So simply you can just turn it on and off here.
And you can see on the vector scope, the blue on the right-hand side of the image, how that's manifesting on the bottom right quadrant. Well, they're not quadrants, are they? octrant, whatever the right word for a separation of those is. But anyway.
Yeah. And to work in the Magic Bullet looks, we have to start your workflow in Magic Bullet looks. It's always nice to define your footage first. So we have the source tool over here. If you click that, you will have the My Footage is tool in controls open. So you can determine if you have a log image, you can actually select your log image there, and it will change the contrast ratio for your footage. For now, I'm having a Rec 709 type of clip, so I'm going to select sRGB for that. Do you have anything to add, Simon?
I'm going to make a couple of comments when I'm going to grab the screen in a few minutes' time and talk about log workflow and how you might work with sRGB, and then how you might make the presets viewable depending on the different contrast ratios of your footage. So I'll talk about that then.
Right. Okay, cool. So now let's go into the core of this discussions. Actually, we want to talk about a grade, and one particular grade that we want to break down today, we want to discuss about, is actually Bleach Bypass. And Bleach Bypass is a very distinctive look. It has been used in so many film, in motion, like a lot of them are normally war film, like Saving Private Ryan, what else, Seven, Evita, and a lot more.
You're going to need a longer piece of paper for that list.
Yeah.
It's just the
and
it's the one, isn't it?
Exactly. It is very distinctive because it gives you that very contrasty look and very grainy look, and those silvery hue on your skin, silvery look on your skin. The effect itself, it's actually originated back then in the film lab, when people are skipping the bleach bath. As we know that in developing film, there are multiple baths that you need to do for your film roll. And one of them is the bleach bath. And by skipping the bleach bath, you actually retain the silver halide content from the film roll. And by doing so, your footage will have more grain, and then also it looks more silvery. And sometimes people are totally skipping it, or they just reduce the amount of time where your film is spending inside the bath. So by doing that, you can really see that the characteristic of bleach bypass is actually a very high contrast look with a slightly desaturated color. And to do so, a lot of filmmakers back in the day, they opt for shooting in an even and diffuse light, because they know that if you already know that you're going for a bleach bypass, because it's a non-reversible effects when you've done that to your film roll. So since it adds so many contrast and grain, normally what they've done is shooting in a very even and diffuse light. Most of the time, they also opt for using a diffusion filter in front of their lens. And one of the characteristics when you're using that is that you will get a glow on your highlight. There's a very nice article from Kevin Shaw that break down the look of bleach bypass. I think for those who are interested, we can link the article in the chat. So now let me show you.
Absolutely. I'll link to that. I'll link to that now. But it's worth mentioning that Kevin Shaw is one of the founders of the International Colorist Academy, and he's just amazing colorist, and he's got some great technical resources about not only managing the creative look, but about managing technical things like especially HDR and so on. So I'll put a link to that article. It's well worth looking at that one, and also some of the other ones that he's written.
Thank you, Simon. It's a nice read, though. I must admit, it's a really nice article. So let me show you the principle of bleach bypass and how can we do that in Premiere. So you can actually achieve that simply by using Colorista, for example, and simply to play around with the amount of saturations of your and the contrast of your footage. And to do that, you can simply increase the contrast, because we know that the process is increasing the contrast and reducing the saturations. You can simply do this, but this kind of approach, although it's very easy and very fast, this kind of approach is losing the organic look. And then also it lacks flexibility in case you want to do, in case you want to refine your adjustment on your look. What else can you do? You can also play around with a luminance gain. You can increase the luminance in the highlight and compensate that in the mid-tone and shadow. And then you can also play around with the saturations. This is basically also the same thing, because it's increasing your contrast and desaturating your image. But again, as the first approach, this is also very, although it's fast, I will not do that for a real project. So what can you do in Premiere Pro if you want to use Colorista? Well, we can actually mimic the process of Bleach Bypass itself. We know that Bleach Bypass is a superimposed black and white image on, how do you call it? It's a black and white image superimposed onto the color image. So by understanding that, we can simply just copy our clip. I will press Alt and drag my clip up. And in my first clip, I already apply Colorista. It's actually the Colorista applied from the previous one. It's already reset it. So in this first clip, I will dedicate this clip for the Luma adjustment. And I will make this as the monochrome image. And later on, I will superimpose it to my second layer. So what I'm gonna do is I actually gonna desaturate my image. And from now on, it's like editing the black and white image. So I can play around with the contrast. I can also introduce red in the shadow a little bit. Or in this case, I can also use some LUT that shipped with Colorista, because we know that Colorista shipped with creative LUT as well. And one particular LUT that worked well with this is this suntan, because it's introduced the warmth in the shadow and midtones. So for this layer to be able to be, how do you call it, stacked on top of the second layer, we will change the blend mode. I found that two blend modes that work particularly well with this approach is this overlay, which gives you a very high contrast look, or the soft light, which gives you slightly softer look. And I will opt for the soft light here. And on your second layer, I will dedicate this layer only for the color channel. So I will use I will, how do you call it, adjust my color in this layer, and I will adjust my contrast in the first layer. So for example, here, I want to retain the color of my skin tone. So I will just push orange into my midtones and slightly on my highlight as well. Since the highlight is slightly a little bit too bright, I will reduce the luminance gains a little bit, and I will reduce the saturations a little bit. So actually, this is almost ready. And by doing this approach, I have a lot of flexibility by using this approach. So for example, if now I want to go for a more duotone type of look, I can do that in the same layer using Colorista. I can use the same Colorista, but I can also use another instance of Colorista and rename it. And here I will play around with the adjustment, and I will just make my image to look like a duotone, to create a duotone effect. And to do that, I will just push cyan into my shadow and push orange into my highlight. And
we're covering all the classic grades here. We got bleach bypass and orange and teal. So
Why not?
Take a shot. Absolutely.
Yeah. And what's nice is now you can use the strength slider to control the intensity of your look, right? And if you want to play around, if I want to play around with the amount of contrast, I can do that in my first layer here. I can use the same Colorista. I can also use the second instance of Colorista. For example, if I want to increase the contrast, I can simply just use the curve. Or if I want to lift my black to have that kind of fade look, I can also do that in the first layer, right? So that is Bleach Bypass in a nutshell. Doing so with this approach, it's nicer, you have more control, but sometimes when you have deadline, this type of approach sometimes, when you don't have so much time, it sometimes can throw you out. And because you have to copy this, add this and that. And a simpler way to do that in Premiere Pro is just by using Magic Bullet Looks. And I will show you how to do that in Magic Bullet Looks. I will delete that.
So you've shown the long way to do it,
Exactly.
and how to use the same tools in Looks. So we're seeing behind the curtain here, Max, for your approach. The one important thing to say, though, also about the difference between, say, Colorista and Looks, although they share controls and they share color science, is that inside Colorista you do have the ability to be able to keyframe all those different parameters. And in Looks, its major thing is that it has an interface to be able to set up treatments quickly. But as you can see on Max's screen here, it's just got the one keyframe, the strength keyframe. And so the question I get asked a lot is, what is the difference between Colorist and Looks? When should I use one? When should I use the other? And the answer is our sitting on the fence answer, which is it depends. But I suppose the real world answer would be balancing tends to be better in, say, Colorista, especially have light changes through the shot that you can then keyframe. And if you want to do a stylistic adjustment that affects the whole frame, typically that's when to use Looks.
Yeah. Totally agree with you, Simon. And moving on, continuing the topic, I already apply Magic Bullet Looks in my timeline, in my clip. So I will just click Edit Look. Now, here, I can also apply the similar approach by adjusting the contrast, reducing the saturations a little bit, and dropping Colorista in the subject tools. Now I can retain some of the skin tone and reduce the saturations. So literally now I got the basics. And now if I want to do the creative look on top of that, I have all the flexibility. Now, for example, if I want to push for a duotone, there's a duotone looks inside the tools here in the post. And typical grade again, teal and orange, because why not? And you can play around with the balance.
Yes, there is only one grade.
So literally, I'm now done. But there's even a simpler way in Magic Bullet Looks to approach Bleach Bypass. And that particular approach is just by using the Bleach Bypass tool, because Magic Bullet Looks has a Bleach Bypass tool. So in the camera category, we have the negative Bleach Bypass. And in the post category, we have the print Bleach Bypass. So I would approach Bleach Bypass by adjusting my contrast first using the tools. And I would normally do, what I normally do is just like pump everything up to see how the thing's done, how the things affect the clip. And then from there, I will reduce it. So now, for example, I think it's a good time for going for a specific look. So for example, if I want to emulate the look of Saving Private Ryan, this is, by the way, from the 2004 DVD, the image from 2004 DVD. So for example, if I want to emulate Saving Private Ryan, what I can do is actually, I can just determine the contrast first using the negative Bleach Bypass. Perhaps that's okay. All right, I will just go 100 there, and I will reduce the print bypass a little bit. And now I can determine my contrast using my source tool. Maybe not that much, right? And to alter the skin tone, I will use Colorista, and I will drop it into my subject. I can also drop it like that. And I will push the midtones more to the orange. Let me see. And the highlight more to the orange, slightly down to the yellow. There. Oops. By the way, double clicking the point is resetting the parameters to default. So, and I can push the shadow more to the side. So, and I can adjust my highlight down a little bit. And as we see, we have like the highlight in Saving Private Ryan image over here. The highlight is not pure white. So we can also do that by using different tools called the warm and cool. I can place that in my subject. I can also place that in the post sections, but for this look, I think the subject will work better. And I can push slightly to the blue. And from now on, it's just a fine tuning. So I revisit my Colorista tool again, and I fine tune the skin tone, perhaps more to the red. Right. Okay.
Nice. And you can still, if you wanted to build up that effect that you created entirely inside Colorista, you could effectively replicate or reproduce that, couldn't you? If you weren't using the tools.
And here, what's lacking is actually the film grain, because as we see, there are a lot of grain and the image is very sharp from Saving Private Ryan. In Magic Bullet Suite, there's a specific tool for introducing a filmic grain, and that is Magic Bullet Renoiser. It's available as a standalone in Magic Bullet Suite, or it is also available as another tool here in the post sections in Magic Bullet Looks. So I can use that to sharpen my image because it has sharpen category. I think I remember reading that the sharpen tools was included in the renoiser because most of the time renoisers is used right at the end of your chain, and most of the time you are sharpening your image in the end of your workflow anyway. So by adding the sharpening tools here, you actually can save a lot of time. Instead of by using another tool, there's already a built-in sharpen tools. So I will just pump up my sharpening tools. And I will sharpen my edges only. I'll put it to 100. And here we have the grain amount. 50 is enough, I think. Size, okay. But I will increase the texture. Right.
Can I add a comment in here at this point, Max?
Yes, sure, Simon.
The question, or the conversation I often have with editors at this point when we're talking about renoiser is, well, why would I need that when I've got my library of grain samples that have been scanned off film and I use those on the timeline and so on? And the answer to that is this is intelligent grain. And we scanned, or rather the engineering team scanned many different types of film. And we worked out that what happens is when you grain, well, when you shoot on film, then the image is broken up into these different values. And what Renoiser does, it takes that size and texture amount that Max was talking about, and then it creates a whole grid, if you like. Well, it's not a grid because it's not exactly uniform, but it creates this texture of those elements, takes the underlying image, projects those onto that grid of the grain, and then comps the whole thing back together again. So it means that it gets away from the problem with, you may have seen that in some cases, if you use some pre-shot grain as a clip, and then you have it with a blender mode over a particular piece of footage. It can look like you're viewing the footage through like a dirty window almost, but this is something that takes on the characteristics of the actual footage itself. So, which is why it looks really nicely like grain itself. And fun fact, this is the same grain that is added inside the VFX Suite Super Comp. And so we liked it so much, we used it on all the professional compositing tools. But you can grab, as Max is showing here, you can see the difference if you zoom into that, Max, and then just jump through on down onto some of the presets. So if you just jump through, say, onto something like
presets here, I think the very obvious one is the Super 8, right, Simon?
Yep, and that is adding those small bits of grain. But here's another little tip that I like to do is if you press monochromatic on there, Max, they just under log grain, it will takes on the actual color characteristics of the footage itself. So if you slightly zoom out, then although you could argue the technical accuracy of then manipulating stuff in digital after you've applied an analog effect, that's another esoteric conversation. But the idea is here in this case, you get a really nice natural looking grain that takes the hues and those values from the underlying footage. So that whenever I'm using a renoiser, I recommend that as a key tip.
Yeah, and it is always nice to add a particular amount of film grain to your image, because most of the time you never know. For example, if you want to upload your image to some platform like YouTube or Vimeo, you know that it compresses your image a lot, and if you have the grain, it's actually saving your footage from the potential issue of bending. So actually, in the renoiser, there's a preset for that, right, Simon? It's called the compression.
The idea, compression proofing. There's another one in there called vitamins as well. Click on that, image vitamins. What this is doing is adding effectively an invisible grain to the image. And especially if you've got areas of banding like a graphic or a color sunset, which is moving slowly from one color to another, then it's very easy for the compression software, especially if you're using 8-bit, say H.264 or H.265 compression. It's very easy to introduce macro blocking, which is that banding where the colors change. But if you add a small amount of this grain, even if it's not visually affecting the treatment, that forces the encoder to work harder and can help against grain. And this isn't a new trick. This is something that we were adding in After Effects back in the 90s, but it's nice to be able to have this at the end of the tool chain as an effect. In fact, you can have two instances. You can have the grain instance, and then you can have another one if you needed to. Plus, and you'll see on the highlights, midtone, and shadow, if you've got lots of text, bright text baked into a video, and you want to adjust that and add grain, but everywhere except the brightest text, that's a nice trick that I've seen quite often. So you can kind of do a secondary color correction inside the grain, if you like.
Yeah.
And an answer to Max's question, yes, you can adjust it for RGB for the red, green, and blue channels too, effectively. But you spotted that.
And
can you do 2 instances? Okay, sorry, can you do 2 instances of that and blend the color of the grain as percentage? Yes, you can do all of that as you just pointed out in your answers on the questions panel, Mac. You can do that with these multiple settings too.
Yeah. And in Magic Bullet Looks, you can preview your effects by clicking this button over here. So, for example, the image vitamins presets, this is before and this is after. It's hardly visible.
Yeah, it's very subtle.
Yeah.
But in that case, that's perfect for it.
Yeah. So, yeah. And to preview the overall effects, you can click this. This is before and this is after. Or you can use the shortcut, the / in your keyboard.
Max, would you like going just up to the preference cog and just click on that right at the top of the interface? I know what it's like. You watch one of these tutorials and then It's like, hang on, didn't they say something about keyboard shortcuts? Well, if you just go back and just to the drop down itself, Max, just wanted to point out that there's a link actually to the keyboard shortcuts, so that will give you a reminder about where to go or what to press for these various things. But the key thing, I think, on these shortcuts, yay, shortcuts, is the left and right arrow keys or the chevron tools, so that you can actually move from tool to tool without moving your mouse up to the controls panel and back, especially if you're using a Wacom tablet. I find that really useful to save on that whole muscle movement as you're going, especially on your large resolution screen.
Yeah. Right. And once you're satisfied with your looks, or if you want to save your looks, you can do that. You can save your looks as a preset, and Magic Bullet allow that. Once you to do that, you can simply click this icon over here. So for example, if I like this look, and let me adjust my sharpening, and I want to save that as a preset, I can simply click that, and now you have this interface. You can simply type in the name. I miss H. And then also it shows you the directory where your preset is saved, and you can select save. And now your presets is saved in the custom area over here. So that is saving Magic Bullet looks preset. And I have another image from Saving Private Ryan, but this one is from the 2018 4K Ultra HD Blu-ray, which is a little bit more magenta.
It's so funny that what, a new version, a new grade. This is quite interesting. This is the whole time, isn't it?
Yeah. And well, we can also modify our grade to look similar like that by simply adjusting the Colorista wheel over here. It's no complicated process for that. So now let's move on and let's take a look into a different look. And I have another snapshot from Children of Men, because this is another film that used the Bleach Bypass technique. And I can simply reset my look, and I can approach my workflow like the previous one. So I will just adjust my Bleach Bypass tool to determine the amount of contrast. And I think this is too contrasty, so I will reduce it a little bit. There. Right. And actually what I want to show you here, another tools that we haven't discussed so far, and this tools is available as a standalone and also available in Magic Bullet Looks, that is Magic Bullet Film. As we know, we probably know the website Shot on What. This is such a nice database for a lot of movies. So for example, if you search for Children of Men, you can actually
This
see.
is such a great site. Yeah. Sorry, Max, but I just got to jump in. I love this site. This is shotonwhat.com. It basically lists all the tech that is used on most of the films that you know and love. And so you can dive in, you can see what type of camera, what type of lens, whether it was shot on film as well. So this is a brilliant way of just investigating. If you like the look of a certain feature, then you can begin to, as Max, sorry Max, stealing your thunder, I should let you do this, I'm just so excited about it. But the idea is that it helps you interpret how did they get that look, and how can I begin to recraft it. But anyway, sorry, over to you, Max.
It is nice because you sometimes don't have access to behind the scene and to see how those films are shot, and this website provides that, and it's really nice overview for the particular look that you want to try to emulate. So for example, in Children of Men, we see that they use Kodak Vision's 5229 as a film negative, and then the film print is Fuji 3513D. So we can actually emulate that by using the same film in Magic Bullet Film. So first, let's apply Magic Bullet Film. We have two different film, the film negative in the camera sections, and then the print film in the post sections. So let's apply the film negative after the negative bypass. And we can select the film that we want to emulate. In this case, is Kodak 5229. And let's use the film print in the post category, and that was Fujifilm. We don't have the Fuji 35113, but I found out that 3510 is close enough. So by using this, you already done most of the approach, most of the work, heavy lifting. So by using this type of technique, now I just need to fine tune my image to look similar like Children of Men. So here we see that the skin tone is a little bit too magenta in my footage compared to Children of Men. And then the shadow is too blue and it should go more cyan. So we can actually do that by using Colorist again, and we can drop it in the subject category. And I can push my midtones closer to yellow. I can push my highlights closer to yellow as well, and push my shadow to cyan. It's almost there, except that I need to reduce the amount of highlights a little bit, bump up the shadow a little bit, right? Okay. And if you want to have a duotone type of look, we can also use the duotone tool here. And now I will push the highlight more into the yellow and the shadow close to the cyan. And I will play with the balance, right? So we're almost there.
It's a nice way of quickly being able to emulate something.
It is very quick. And I found out that there's one particular tools that I really like a lot in Magic Bullet looks. That is the Vignette, because we know that a lot of filmmaker, when they shot, they either use the diffusion filter. We can also emulate that by using the diffusion filter in the matte. And you can select any presets. Like here, I will go with a warm mist, and it looks quite nice already. But I will approach that by using the Vignette, and by dropping that down, look at how the result, it's just really nice. I will just tweak the size, and that's literally it. And what I'm gonna do is adding the filmic grain and increase the sharpening a little bit and sharpen edge. Maybe that's a little bit too much. That's it. Increase the texture.
It's very nice. This is a great answer to the question that we often get about when do we use looks? I mean, this is a classic example. You can do color correction, of course, in Colorista, but Max has done a good job of kind of balancing that, because you've got tools that you can't find anywhere else. At least I haven't found them, that you can then quickly throw on and experiment. And we haven't even mentioned I suppose the highlight, which is the presets, the 300 or so presets for this sort of thing that we've already done. So we'll get onto that in a moment. But that's the interesting thing, is that looks gives you the ability to play with this, especially if you haven't had the advantage of like a long formal training in color grading. And many editors I talk to haven't had that as well. They've kind of been promoted to fixing the graphics, putting the end plate on, doing the subs, sweetening the audio, and doing the grade in variant different styles, so or amounts. So there's if you are having to kind of blur the edges for these different things, this is when Lux comes into its own.
Yeah. And simply, the key to understanding Lux is to understand the effect chains that it processed from left to right. That's it. And by placing these effects in front or behind, you kind of get like different look, right?
Yeah. This is important as well because the tool chain, as Max mentioned, processes from left to right. So that's an important thing to do. And also something else which is interesting is that Lux has been HDR since before it was cool. You can add and take away colors and values in the tool chain here without affecting your original material. So within Lux itself, you can push up your values to well over 1 or to well below 0, and then rescue them back and still have that detail. You don't have to worry about the clipping. That's not to say that when you exit from Lux that you don't have to worry about it. When you exit from Lux, it does clip the maximum bright values, but within the interface itself, you've got leeway to be able to go crazy. And a small extra bit of information, I can sense you asking, hang on, Simon said HDR. Are you considering HDR? Because Lux has this capability, we're looking at it. We're looking at all sorts of options for the way ahead and how we can follow people's productions and so on. So for the moment, it doesn't output HDR, but it's something that we are investigating. And I'll probably get into trouble from the product team, but I think it's important for you to know the fact that we are listening and we do respond to the way people are needing to work these days.
So yeah, we can actually save the presets and share the presets later on, Simon. What do you think?
Absolutely, yes. A couple of questions are coming in. One from Turkey about grading a log clip. Yes, I will definitely be covering that. Spoiler alert, we might go over by a couple of minutes, but that's definitely something that I wanted to point out, that workflow.
Sure. I can hand over the screen to you, Simon, if you want to.
Great. Quick question from Max saying that the film process for each release should be considered the original theatrical, the DVD, Blu-ray, and the 4K, absolutely, and the HDR, and they're scanned separately in different workflows over the years. So these are all sorts of variables to consider in matching. Yeah, you're absolutely right. You've done a great job on that, Max. So
thank you.
yes, just interestingly, can you go to the renoiser section here, Max?
Sure.
On your tool and just click on the preset drop down. So it's a little trivia for you. You'll notice that in one of these settings, it's called Hadley's Hope. So those science fiction fans of you will know that Hadley's Hope is, of course, the settlement on LV-426 in which features in the Aliens movie. And this is named after the grain, the experimental grain that they used on the film, and which was a really obvious grain. It's really quite dramatic, which added to the film. But of course, as Mac has pointed out, in the subsequent releases, they've adjusted things. And so as I understand it, on the Blu-ray version, there was a lot of effort to actually remove a lot of the grain and to give a color grade and so on. So I think it's an interesting voyage through the different versions, depending on what you can get. But you'd be hard pressed at the moment, unless you've got access to the original VHS, to see the film in this grainy version. But maybe you could use Renoiser to add that. But anyway, cool.
Yeah.
Let me grab your screen and I will show a couple of things because I did promise a log workflow.
Yeah.
So show my screen. A couple of quick things that I found useful. And just on this clip here, I'll come back to log. Just wanted to show you this whilst I remembered I had this loaded up. So if you wanted to do corrections in or secondary corrections inside Lux, you still can, because we've still got the ability to use, say, the colorist pins to be able to then push some of the oranges towards red and those sorts of things that we showed in previous sessions. But this is what I wanted to show you here. If I go into the lens section and choose Lens Vignette, apart from the easy way where we can just draw on the area that we want to highlight, we just increase the amount here. So this is a pretty standard, quick way of working with a lens vignette. But inside looks, you have these things like the highlight setting. So if you drag highlights down to 0, then it's affecting the whole image. But if we drag it up to 100, what it means, it's protecting the highlights. And I see this all the time. If you've got a vignette on and then you move it away from center, then you can get a really gray area in your highlights. In fact, let's just reduce the highlights down to 0. Notice how that now, as I move the vignette, this previously bright area is now getting a little gray. So, I mean, does this matter? Well, it reduces the pop, I think, from the image. So it's quite useful to be able to protect highlights, especially bright specular highlights in an image, so that when you move this around, it's actually still keeping it bright. See, there's the shadow on the top of the car roof. And also the order of processing. So if we added, say, Colorist beforehand, and then we push that to be blue shadows, here we go. So we've got blue shadows, then they're slightly darkened by the vignette, and that's the color of the back seat, is slightly blue. But if we then process this after the event, here we go. So we've got a darkened color using the vignette, and then we're pushing the shadows blue, that becomes even more blue. So the trick is the order in which you process these is important. Great, log workflow stuff. Let's jump into log here. I've got the perfect clip for this. Here we go. So this was shot on an array. This is log C. And if we jump into looks, then we can add a LUT to this. We've got a LUT tool here inside the post section. And if we add a LUT, and then you can load up a number of presets. Whoops, here we go, the presets, some of which are the duplicates of the ones in Colorista. But we can, of course, choose our own one. Let's choose a LUT that I received from the, here we go, it was from the ARRI website. Oh, don't say I haven't got it kicking around here. Oh, I reorganized my stuff the other day. Okay, pretend that I've got that correctly. We'll go to, where is it? Log C. No, I'll tell you what, I'll do this properly. I will find this because that's crazy. I need to show you this the proper way around. So let's jump onto here. Let's find my LUT folder. And here it is. This proves this is live. Okay. Okay, now I've swapped it over. Just choose, let's choose a LUT, and then I'll go back to this folder. Now I've got my LUTs. Here we go. So this is the one I wanted to point out to you, which is log C to Rec 709, and this I downloaded from the Alexa, the ARRI site. Here we go. So standard process of manipulating log footage, but let me just remind you about the importance of processing on the timeline. If we put in, say, a very simple, let's just go a simple exposure tool, and we manipulate the exposure after the LUT is processed, then what happens is, as I reduce the stops, we lose all that lovely detail, the whole point of shooting in these wider color gamuts, if we are processing after the LUT. So the correct way is to process beforehand. So just by moving this tool before the LUT means that when I adjust the exposure, you still keep all that information, because LUTs, as you well know, typically reduce the gamut so that they do it automatically for you, and that's lovely, but you need to be able to color correct before the actual effect. And in fact, let's just show you this with, say, some Colorista. If I do this afterwards, I can adjust all sorts of things like the highlights and the midtones separately and do the shadows only if it's before. So if I do this beforehand, then we get all our lovely highlight colors. So that's an important thing to remember. This brings up an interesting topic, because what if I jump in here and I want my LUT, but then I want to look at a series of all the presets. And here they are. I'm just going over where it says looks. And here are the hundreds and hundreds of different presets for the different types of look. But notice this, as I'm hovering over each one, then it's replacing all the tools on the tool chain. And so I'm now effectively getting a preset which is applied to this low contrast log footage, and it's ignoring the LUT. So there is a trick to this. So if you right click on any tool and hit pin, then that will pin that tool in that location. Then if you hover over any of the presets, notice that that LUT tool is still intact. So it's allowing you to preview that footage as if you had applied the LUT beforehand, but it's processing it before the LUT. So that's the important workflow for that as well. And by the way, if you then let's just add a preset here. I'll tell you another quick trick. Sorry, let's add the lens vignette. Let's apply that lens vignette here, center it on the people, right click, pin the lens vignette and the LUT. That means now when we go to our different treatments, notice that both those tools are being pinned. So let's go for something like critical care. Here we go. And if we do that trick that Max showed by saving a preset, if I save this preset here, so let's call this critical care 2 and put that into the section of custom presets, then here's an interesting thing. If I go into the custom presets here, there's my list of custom ones, custom critical care 2. Now, if I wanted to share this look with somebody and I wanted to locate those presets or view the presets folder, this is in the cog drop-down window, then that I can view on my machine. Where is it located? Here, inside the library folder. Hang on, let's find this on my system. Let's do this again. View presets folder. Where are you hiding? Serves me right for actually reorganizing my files. Okay, trust me, this takes you, I've got a new double screen set up, which is hiding my window. Anyway, going to that presets folder takes you to that preset, and what it will do, it will embed the LUT if you've got it inside there. So if let's just jump back here, do that properly again, add the LUT, go through this process of adding the LUT here, choose the LUT. Here we go. Now, if I save this LUT with all the other corrections, that LUT will be included inside that preset. So it's just something that you don't have to remember in case you accidentally forgotten to share the LUT with somebody. Cool. We did have another question about this window here, where we're actually looking at the preview window. This is something from ages ago that David brought up. That what if you don't get exactly the right frame? So this frame here, if I go into Magic Bullet Looks, I jump into, I'm getting the right frame in the preview window. But we've noticed that on occasion, if you use in Premiere Pro an adjustment layer, some versions of Premiere Pro then send a different frame into the preview window inside Magic Bullet Looks. And that largely we've found is the versioning issue. Often just getting up to the latest version of Premiere and Looks is a fix for that, because we work very closely with Adobe to make sure that the right frame is being sent. And if you are operating on either a Mac or a Windows machine, and you're an individual rather than the team, then you'll be used to the Red Giant Application Manager, which is here. And this is a good way of finding out whether or not there's an update. Look, I've got an update to Shooter Suite that I need to update to. But it lets you know which versions of the software that you're using and whether or not you can download an update. So in the similar way to the fact that you can do this with the Creative Cloud panel that Adobe supply. So that's one workaround. But if that's not working for you, then let us know. And there's usually a situation that fixes that. But that's the only time that I've seen the frame that isn't the current time indicator or the playback frame being reported back into the preview window. Great. Question from Turkey. Should we be changing my footages on the left-hand side of the screen? Excellent. This was the one thing I wanted to cover as well. So let's just look at something like this. So this is some Cine style footage. This is using the CineStyle profile on a Canon SLDR, but SLR, sorry, DSLR. Losing my words today. So how should we be approaching this? Well, the answer is that this is a reason for my footages, because this processes first. So in this case, if you know you're working with, say, 8-bit footage, which this is at H.264, then you can increase the contrast on this. And then if you hover over those different presets, then you're getting that contrast being processed first. And so on footage that isn't log, that is the workflow. But if for footage that is log, then you need to process this at the end of the tool chain, because otherwise you'll be reducing the values before you actually process them on the timeline. So there's two slightly different but linked workflows for that. So rule of thumb, if it's not log, you're not using a LUT, then you can get away with using my footages. But if it's a log footage, then you can use the LUT tool here. And also, let's confuse you. Let's reset these. What if you did all of this just using, say, one of the S-curve tools, and then you found this was quicker to be able to then manipulate and find your color values using one of the tool curves? You could still pin this to the preview and then be able to then hover over different presets if you wanted to, and it will still have that S-curve there. So that's kind of a hybrid workflow, but I think the takeaway really is use my footages when it's anything other than one of those wide gamut footage elements. Cool. Question from Greg. I put my LUT into Resolve, but weird outcome in Magic Bullet. Is this wrong? It depends on your workflow. It depends where the LUT is being processed. So again, that's something to share with us. Please do. Training at maxon.net gets you through to our training department, and also the support at Red Giant gets you through to the support area. But you should be able to get decent LUT outputs with Resolve. But having said that, Resolve's got such amazing color treatment and color space treatment that I would suggest that is better letting Resolve organize your LUT and then using looks as part of a node workflow, which should help with that. But let us know, get in contact with us, and maybe we can help you work through that workflow. Oh my goodness, 11 minutes after the hour.
We did it again.
I suppose. I know, it's not a surprise, is it? Okay, great. So again, what really these sessions, as I know you've heard me say before, but these sessions are a jumping off point, because if you go to the tutorial site on the Red Giant website, then there's a whole host of these things. Even if you just chose Magic Bullet Suite, there are many hundreds of hours of tutorials talking about in more detail the sorts of things that we've been mentioning. And also, as usual, my 20-second tips are a tiny version of that, and there's lots of things in there to be able to remind you of workflows, just like saving custom looks from Magic Bullet Looks or pinning tools. Let's do a test of this search. What if I did pin in here? With a search on that, should take you to, here we go, pinning tools in Magic Bullet Looks. Exactly that workflow that I was just talking about seconds ago, where you take the tool and you put it on and then you pin it inside the tool chain. So that's really why we're running these sessions, to kind of get the conversation going about certain techniques, and then showing you where you can go for more information about it. So all these links we'll have in the email follow-up, plus the link. I know I mentioned it at the beginning, but it's worthwhile mentioning again here. All the sessions in August and September that we got coming up, covering more of the disciplines and tools that we make as a group of companies, Maxon, Red Giant, and Redshift. and also the recordings of this and all the other sessions on the Maxon volume program training on YouTube. Fantastic. I think, what have I missed out, Max? What other else housekeeping things haven't I done? I think that's the usual.
Yeah, before we wrap up, I think we need to point out to a very good resource to those people that really love to increase the knowledge on color corrections and color grade. That is a very useful resource, a book by Alexis van Herkman.
Oh, yes.
It's a must-have.
Yes. Do you have it with you, Max?
Sadly not.
No, you've got it at home.
No.
All right.
Yeah.
We'll add a link to this.
We'll add a link to that.
Just, what I know we're going over, but it's just so good. I just wanted to show everyone. There's an amazing colorist that I know called Alexis van Herkman, and he manages to distill these color treatments into deep technical knowledge into something that's easily understandable. So here it is.
Yeah.
So if I bring it onto my screen here, here it is, the Color Correction Handbook. I just happen to be on the UK Amazon here, but you can get it everywhere. And this is a must read. It's absolutely amazing. Again, I earn nothing from this, just apart from the warm glow of recommending you one of the best books I know on color correction. So it's definitely worth a look, and we'll add that link into the show notes as well. Fantastic. Some nice comments. Thank you very much. Thank you, Kent. Thank you, Greg. Thank you, Mac. Thank you, Simon. And thanks, Mads. Everyone's still staying, so appreciate it. I really do. Thank you also, Greg. Greg is saying thank you to you, Max, for all your excellent color grading tips, and saying you're an excellent colorist. So appreciate that. It's really nice. Really nice to see you break down and how you would approach those kind of things. But yes.
Thank you.
And again, Max, since we're talking about it, thanks again for joining us for these last weeks. It's been a privilege to have you share your knowledge with us. So we thank you for that.
The pleasure is mine. The pleasure is mine. Thank you very much for having me.
Well, we'll have you back, of course.
Awesome.
Because we're going to continue doing these.
Yeah.
Brilliant. So thanks again, everyone. Thanks for your patience. You know we were going to overrun. It's inevitable. See, the new 60 minutes is actually 76 minutes. Anyway, cool. All right, we'll see you on the next one.
Right.
Yes, exactly. All right. Take care. Stay healthy. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.